Hi, I'm Michael Pooley. This is the second part of a two-part series on the beginnings of Playback Theatre in Australasia. The first part focused on the trip to New Zealand and Australia by 4 members of the original company in 1980. This second part focuses on what happened immediately after that trip and the establishment of playback theatre companies in Sydney and Melbourne. It's not designed as a definitive history. It's merely an opportunity to hear some recollections from some of those who were involved, what they found challenging, what they loved. I hope you enjoy it.
It seemed, it was kind of an obvious next step, like we're not going to stop doing this just because you go home, we're going to continue. So it felt very organic that there would be ongoing, something coming out of this.
And I think a group of us decided to create a group, a playback theatre troupe, and we started sort of rehearsing once a week.
We were feeling our way in the dark. They'd done some workshops, left. Bridget and Francis and Mary had their own experience, and with them, we were teaching ourselves how to do it. We were trying to work out how to do it ourselves. We set a 3-month rehearsal period, weekly rehearsals, and then we would perform, so that there was a deadline to work towards. And that first performance of Sydney Playback Theatre, I think it was either September or October 1980. It's at St John's Church Hall in Paddington.
Right. And were you a part of that performance?
200 people came, and we couldn't decide who should be part of the first performance, so everyone was on stage. There was a conductor, 11 actors, and a musician. And when we did fluid sculptures, like all 11 actors were on stage, and 3 or 4 people would step out to do the fluid sculpture. So we didn't have 11 people fluid sculptures, maybe 5, maybe 6, but
how did it feel like, that first performance?
Oh, it was wildly exciting, and it was this new thing. And apart from the original company, that there was no other playback companies in the world.
Does anything, either performance-wise or rehearsal-wise, stand out from that early period?
Just the fun of it, really.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, it's a great way to be together.
Yes.
And just the sort of the joy of learning together, and the willingness to make mistakes and learn from making mistakes, and just that ongoing learning process, never feeling as if, we've mastered it now. It's just like we're continually exploring and just playing it by ear. And it was fabulous just seeing it evolve. And those Saturday nights once a month down at Drama Action Centre. Yeah.
We all believed in it so deeply and knew we had gold, and just wanted to keep polishing the gold. So there was tremendous goodwill, and it was intense, we wanted to learn, and so how do you give feedback that's useful, that can be heard? How do you work out a process in rehearsal where you can learn from each other? Bridget and Francis and Mary were highly skilled group leaders, all psychodrama trained, so that the process was always really strongly held. and they were learning too. The public performance, people come to you, and a community of the Sydney playback community started to build up, and people would come and come again and come again. And of course there was a very strong link between the Sydney playback community and the Drama Action Centre community. And Drama Action Centre Playback Theatre became part of the curriculum, and Drama Action Centre started to offer playback theatre workshops and trainings. And then people started to invite us into community and organisational settings. I talked earlier about the shared values and purpose and intentions of the drama action and playback, and that physical robustness was a direct result of the work of the Drama Action Centre and the work of Bridget and Francis, their work right around Australia and New Zealand, based in Lecoq's mask work. There's that influence on the performing, and then it was Drama Action Centre that brought playback to Sydney, and Bridget and Francis, along with Mary Good, who set up Playback Theatre Sydney, and the two had a very close relationship all the way through till the end of 2000, when the Drama Action Centre closed. And often, when the venue was right, Sydney Playback monthly performances happened at the Drama Action Centre.
Yeah.
And the two mailing lists would have crossed over, and Playback Theatre became part of the curriculum of Drama Action Centre.
I finished my year at Drama Action Centre. I went over to New York for a month, and just sort of shadowed the company around, watching them, joining in their performances. Not occasionally I acted, but mostly I didn't. I just, was soaking it all in, really.
Yes.
But I learnt a heap from just being around, and read a lot, and talked to different people. Because they lived in country, they lived in Newports, which is a little university town, and the playback members were in that area, so we'd go to different people's places and different performances in different places, and Jonathan would make sure I had things to read, and I think he was quite organised. I think he had a little program set up for me.
Right.
The Australia-New Zealand spirit would be to be so hospitable. They're not going to put us up in a hotel, and so that did become part of our early ethos. I mean, Joe is a New Zealander, but when we first did training, we tried to put everyone up in houses of friends and things like that. So when Mary came, of course we were going to put her up, and it was also a very big recognition that someone would want to come all that way to learn more. It was so early that it was an honor in a way.
She kind of, it was a great model, because she sort of apprenticed herself,
Yeah.
She was already a person of accomplishment, and she had the commitment and the humility to say,
Right.
I put myself in your space to learn what you have to teach, and of course she had so much to teach herself.
And that is a testament to Mary's character.
Yeah, I would say that, we, and through us, the development of playback in general has been influenced. The influence has gone the other way as well, that we've been influenced in some ways by how things have developed in Australia and New Zealand, that we've been enriched by that. And then, that is where, my background comes in, as well as there are elements from just being in New Zealand, which have fed into, from the beginning, have fed into playback, how playback is conceived, which may be an indirect reason why it was so recognizable and embraceable by these playback pioneers in Australia and New Zealand. That we had this sort of informal, in some ways irreverent, kind of atmosphere. I'm not sure how to put my finger on it exactly, but it was, you know, and the sense of being very kind of grassroots and grounded, you know, that it was not, there was nothing pretentious or superior about what we were doing and how we were presenting ourselves. And
Then I came back to Melbourne and I advertised some workshops in Playback Theatre
Right, okay.
and ran them, and we decided to start a company.
And so, was it easy to find people to come to the workshops?
Yeah.
Right.
Look, it was a time in Melbourne when people loved things like that. Like, I ran drama workshops for a few years and people just loved them. I think it was sort of, so it was the early 80s. I don't know what that means in terms of what was happening in the world, but there was a sort of hunger for that sort of thing. You know, I ran workshops and we had weekly rehearsals, and but we also invited people to come and run workshops for us. So Bridget and Francis and Jonathan and different people came and ran workshops for us. So there was a sense of, you know, professional growth and integrity and all of that and the Melbourne company was quite strong at that point. And I managed to get this fantastic studio, which I shared with a guy who taught Tai Chi, and so for, you know, a really reasonable rent, we had a space. We used to perform there and rehearse there, and, you know.
And do you have a sense or memory of was there much contact between companies, Sydney and Melbourne, or other companies at that stage?
Well, I remember the Sydney company coming down to Melbourne. There was a little bit, yeah. And we had little mini conferences, and I went to Perth and worked with, because Perth started fairly soon too after all that. I started working with Perth, and I did some work in New Zealand too, but I can't remember. So Marilyn and Martin were very strong on the beginnings of playback in Auckland.
Right.
They did drama action the year after I did it.
Okay.
As Mary said, it was not long before Playback Theatre spread, and the Drama Action Centre was both a seed and a hub in that growth. Mary started the Melbourne company after her time at Drama Action and a visit to the States. Companies in Perth, Adelaide, Canberra, Brisbane, Auckland and Wellington all sprung up through students from or connections with the Drama Action Centre. And the centre continued to nourish the growth of Playback Theatre right through to its closure in 2000. How long did that first company stay as a company?
Maybe till 82, somewhere in 82, 83 I went overseas, and I think the company went into recess for some time, and then I think we started up again in 84. So, and Francis and Bridget were still around and I was there, and but that very first company from 80 through 82, that very first group. like I say, maybe into 83. I know I went overseas in 83 for 6 months, so it was sometime in there that the company went into recess for some time.
Mm-hmm.
The next time I did something with Jonathan was 1985, and I did a 5-day advanced conductor course with him in Melbourne. It was a fantastic training
Right.
with people from around Australia, maybe New Zealand as well.
And so I imagine by that stage, things had been established, and do you have a sense of
There was a really strong, so, Mary went back to Melbourne in 81 and set up the Melbourne company. Company started in Auckland and Wellington. Deborah Pearson set up a company in Perth. She was at that conductor workshop. So there was a sense of, there were 4, 5, 6 companies by then, Australia and New Zealand, and a lot of cross-fertilisation between those companies.
In the subsequent years, when we would hear about Playback in Australia actually growing very fast, and the community accepting it and welcoming it in a way that hadn't happened for us in New York. And I remember I wrote about this in the first piece that I wrote about Playback that was published, and I think this part of it ended up not being included, but just reflecting on how Playback found a readier home in that part of the world than it did in the United States. And my theory is because there was still in Australia and New Zealand enough of an intact sense of community that this kind of theatre made sense. Whereas in the United States, it takes a very long time to convince a community that they can that they need this kind of conversation through theatre. It seemed to just work better in that environment, and so we were sometimes even a little envious of how quickly it developed and how busy people became when we were struggling to get just square one of acceptance where we were.
So I was invited back 4 years later, and there are two very strong moments for me. And one was that I was invited to teach a playback session to the drama action students at that time. And Francis actually we went by his sailboat from Greenwich to...
yes.
And that was exciting. But then he introduced me to the students and left. Now we're going to do a session of playback. So I began by saying, well, Playback Theatre. And then one of the students said, oh, well, we've done that already. And, he was being dismissive or, sort of typical Australian anti-authoritarian or something. But at the same time, I thought, oh my goodness, yes, they have done this already. And the Sydney company, the newish Sydney company, they had been doing a project in an orphanage, teaching kids, a series of 8 weeks. And when I was there, it was the last session, and the adult company came and did a show. So there were maybe 2 who were doing the teaching over this time, but the whole group came to do a show for the last, and there were guests, there were officials and whatever. And I happened to be there, so they invited me. And the company did the beginning of the show, and then at a certain point, they suddenly sat down, and a group of the 8-year-olds just went to the stage to show their playback. And it was the look on the face of these kids as they right to the stage. I'm still moved to remember it. You know, I felt I'm not needed anymore.
I don't think it ever occurred to us, like, well, this is ours. You know, no,
Yeah,
it was
we
the
weren't-
opposite. It
we
was like,
didn't have that.
wow, how fantastic! You want to keep doing this. It was like we suddenly had this, you know, these cousins and
Yeah.
brothers and sisters, and you know, it was great.
And of course, we liked these people tremendously, so that made a
Yeah,
big difference
yeah,
too. You know,
yeah.
we wanted to stay
Yeah.
in touch, and that they wanted to keep doing the work. It was great.
And yeah, there was a real sort of discovery of kinship, which continues to this day. Yeah.